echosbox podcast is not meant to be or claiming to be a good place for therapeutic advice. The host is not a licensed therapist and is not offering any services or advice related to mental health in a professional manner. The content discussed on echosbox is commonly highly explicit due to the real nature of expressing honest emotions. While we don't mean to offend anyone, the reality is these discussions might be triggering to many people. Out of respect for all, please do not listen if this content isn't right for you, and forgive us if you have a poor experience. Keep your brain healthy. Hey everyone, welcome back to Echo's Box. This is episode 25, and you were just listening to Hostage by Opt-Out. Opt-Out's one of the heavier bands that I'm involved with. Go check out those tunes everywhere there's music, and also check out sweltersounds.com. We got some sick merch over there from Opt-Out and Jones as well, but the Opt-Out merch is it's so good. You're going to want to go snag a whole fit, trust me. So yeah, go check that out, sweltersounds.com, and Opt-Out everywhere there's music. On to the episode for today, though. So today we're going to talk about a little something called burnout. Now, burnout is a concept that I've only ever really heard of in the professional world. So much so that whenever I experienced burnout in the past, I never really called it burnout because what I was experiencing wasn't related to my professional career so much as it was related to my personal life and extracurricular activities. And even in the information security world, I heard the term burnout thrown out a lot, which reinforced this idea in my head that it had to do with your career life. And I didn't think that, I guess, this term really applied to any other aspects. Not that there wasn't a similar term, but I didn't know what to call whatever it was that I was experiencing. I just didn't know that it was still burnout. This might sound kind of dumb, I don't know, but I just thought that instead maybe I was going through waves of things that I had to deal with, and I felt like I couldn't step back or resolve them in any other way other than to get through it. So instead of seeing myself as being burnt out or being able to catch a start of burning out and call it out and recognize and do something about it, I just carried on with the stress until the wave of stuff was over. And for most of my life, this worked. It worked for a long time. I would get burnt out, not really know that that's what was going on, suffer through it, and then recuperate. The only thing that I didn't realize is just how lucky that I had been to be able to recover naturally from burning out after literally letting myself burn out all the way and survive whatever it was that I was going through, whatever was overwhelming me during those times. And just being able to come out the other side okay. That was really lucky, and I didn't realize that until recently. Another thing I realized recently, and it's the whole reason I'm talking about burnout on the podcast today, is that I started to burn out again. Only this time I caught it, and I realized that I could do something about it. And it's a good thing I did too, because in this realization, I kind of caught a pattern that helped me to identify that if this were to continue, I might never have consistent control over my life. And that's super important for later, so keep it in mind. But because you can't control everything in life, having a mechanism for consistency over the things that you can control in your life obviously has a major impact on your well-being. And I took that for granted. Let's back things up a little bit first, though. I want to better define burnout really quick, and then I'm going to share exactly how I began to burn out here recently and what I did to pull myself out of that state. Or I guess what I am still doing, because it's a process. Now, like I said before, I used to only associate burnout with work or professional efforts. This is a common area of life for people to begin to feel burned out. But this type of burnout, sometimes called job burnout, is just one type. It's common, and it's something that a lot of people do experience, but it's not the only one. And this may seem like a no-brainer, but job burnout and normal burnout are the exact same thing. The terminology is just there to define in what aspect of your life that you are experiencing the burnout in. Kind of seems self-explanatory. But what is burnout? So burning out is a way to describe a form of extreme exhaustion and fatigue. Now, there's a lot of definitions and symptoms for burnout, but I was reading an article on it from the National Library of Medicine, and I found some interesting things. First off, even the National Institutes of Health highlight that the term for burnout was first coined to describe the severe stress and high expectations regarding quote-unquote helping professions, such as doctors and nurses. And this is the stress they might experience from long overtime, constant sacrifice of helping others. They would begin to feel exhausted, listless, and unable to cope, according to this article. Now, I found that fascinating for two reasons. One, because my initial perspective on the idea of burnout being related to professional areas of life was actually validated here, and I can now see why I thought of it this way. It's not only how I had experienced it and heard the terms first off throughout my own career, but even in history, this is where we kind of got it. So that actually wasn't dumb of me at all. It's literally how we as a society first began to formally define the term burnout. And it was in this context of a working profession. I thought that was kind of fascinating. The other reason I found it fascinating were those terms for describing burnout: exhausted, listless, and unable to cope. Of course, we now know that burnout isn't just about work-related stuff. Anyone can experience burnout just from being overwhelmed and overexerting themselves over long periods of time. Where we commonly see it, however, is in self-sacrificing efforts. This very same article that I've been referencing uses some interesting phrasing, calling burnout a term used for the dark side of self-sacrifice. That'll be important later as well, as I begin to talk about myself here shortly. So when someone is burnt out, no matter how it came to be, it's important to understand that this term means to tell us that the individual is fatigued, exhausted, and likely hopeless, and that they feel like there's nothing they can do about any of it. The longer the burnout lasts, the worse the emotions get. And that hopelessness, and this is speaking not only from factual symptoms, but also experience here, can lead to suicidal thoughts. It's a serious mental state to end up in, and it is something that we should take very seriously. I said earlier that I got lucky all those times that I naturally got out of the state of being burnt out without fixing anything. That's what I mean by I got lucky. I got really lucky just being alleviated naturally within time. Sometimes that's because I accomplished my goals and projects, so the burnout had an end date. So other times it came at the cost of people exiting my life. And otherwise it's just aspects of sheer luck. I couldn't even point out how lucky it is or why I was alleviated from it, even if you painted the reasons with bright red against a white background. It's just that much luck is how I see it. It's really hard to identify. But onto my recent burnout. Over the years, I have become someone people tend to count on. You've all heard my countless horror and success stories if you've been listening long enough to the podcast. I help people out a lot. I volunteer, I teach, I give time, and I have a hard time saying no to things that I know I can do to help or benefit others. That's the catch. I say that I know I can do these things. And that's true, but I can't do them all at the same time. You see, I was expecting myself to volunteer for nonprofits, volunteering to teach students at schools, helping out friends, helping out strangers, running a professional group related to my career outside of work, speaking at conferences, writing music, playing shows, investing into my friendships, investing into my romantic relationships, taking care of my house and my dogs, write a book, run a podcast, maintain a disciplined spiritual practice, have a full-time job, and all at the same time. Did it seem like I was rambling there? Because it sure did to me. And that's precisely the problem. Do you see anywhere in there that I am taking care of myself at all in any of that? Even in the things I love, like music, this podcast, my dogs, my relationships, I am spread so thin that I don't get to receive or even put enough energy into those things to make them enjoyable. I don't receive anything from them, and I don't get to put in what they need to make them good. And nowhere in any of that am I doing anything that is restful or caring for myself. I may be doing incredible things. I may be doing things that are beneficial for me or are wonderful achievements in other respects of my life. But none of them are filling me back up with the energy that I need to recover at the very least. All I'm doing is giving away my time constantly until there is none left. And my mind hates idling because idling makes the depression worse for me. Sometimes I'd even use my ceremonial magic practice as a distraction. In a way, it is for reorienting oneself and growing, so naturally your brain will kind of free itself in such a practice, but doing it to keep yourself from being idle is just batshit to me, and I was doing it from time to time. I was literally meditating and altering my brain and even purposely idling and clearing my brain to prevent myself from idling my brain. That sentence was, I even stuttered saying it. It gives me a headache to say out loud. That's how moronic it feels to realize that. That said, it's what I was doing, and that's how severely I wanted to avoid the mental headache that was caused by doing nothing for my depression symptoms. Depression also kicks me down for a double whammy because now not only am I spreading myself too thin, but even if I had the time to recover, I will tell myself that I don't deserve to rest and then would pick up something else to do instead. Depression for me perpetuates the burnout and gives it a tighter grip until I burn all the way out and the spiral will just continue. Where if I actually used the rest, I might have avoided burnout altogether. Now, remember how I mentioned needing to gain back consistent control in my life? Well, the recovery now is the callback to that. And here's why that's important. Thanks to good old therapy again, shout out to my therapist, I realized I was burning out. In this session, we thought of the idea to take a look at my calendar visually and see when I was free again, like what commitments I didn't have. The idea here is that I would survive until that point where I was free again, and once I reached that point, I would then begin to say no to any and everything that didn't make me happy unless I absolutely had to do it. I would begin to practice saying no and taking back time for myself. Sounds nice, right? One problem. Remember how I said I got lucky before and came in and out of waves? Well, as I sat on this idea we had by myself, I sat also with the realization that I was currently actively burned out. And it occurred to me that I cannot take it anymore. The change needed to happen now. I couldn't just wait for that free spot on my calendar. I couldn't wait for when it was convenient. It was hurting too bad. And if I waited, it's possible that I could have screwed myself by filling up the free time incorrectly, or worse, the universe could screw me with more emergencies that I don't have bandwidth for, which I didn't even talk about that. We're not going to hit too hard on that, but in addition to all the things I'm actively choosing to do, you also have the shit that life throws at you, right? So add that to the multiplier, if you will. But yeah, so even if I didn't screw myself over by filling up the time correctly, the worst case scenario is that the universe could screw me over with more emergencies that I just don't have bandwidth for, but I have to deal with anyway. Now, you can't control the universe screwing you over, but you can control you screwing yourself over. So I set myself into action after thinking about that. Talked with some friends, and immediately I began to step back from things. I stepped back from my volunteer efforts. I stepped back from teaching and mentorship. I stepped back from any and all obligations that were not work or things that make me happy. Fortunately, I was met with an abundance of support. All those that I had given to recognized how much I gave and fully supported me taking my time back and left the doors open for me to return at any time. Furthermore, any efforts that I permanently stepped back from also supported me and asked nothing more from me to help transition, and just told me to go take care of myself, and fully understood and genuinely supported. Like, not just yeah, man, don't worry about it. It was like, are you okay? Like, of course this is a priority, like actual genuine care. I ultimately received an abundance of care and support as a reward for taking care of myself. And that was endlessly validating, and I feel very fortunate. It could have gone any number of ways, and I would have carried on regardless, because I have to take care of myself. But it's nice that other people care too. That's a new feeling for me. And in a lot of ways. It's something that I feel like is rare, or maybe that I take for granted if it's not rare. Maybe I just don't notice it as much as I should. So it's another lesson there. But anyway, the problem at this point, though, even though I did all that stuff, is now I have to account for all the smaller efforts and commitments that I've made that are maybe one-offs or that have piled on, because I don't know how many there are, or if there even are any left. I had one pop up after I began to step back from stuff, and I handled that one just fine, but there could be more. So I now have to be prepared for those things to pop up, and I need to continue to exercise saying no to those things to maintain that consistent control that I'm building. And I've talked about an important principle and philosophy that I abide by nowadays before, and this idea is that you can't control the world, but you can control how you respond to it. And that most of the time when you do this, this will allow you to exercise your will in the world and achieve what you need to achieve, because you're able to respond to what the world gives you in a way that you control. So in this case, applying that philosophy to burnout means that while I can't control the world, I can control what I choose to do within it. And it's nice to be a helpful person, but I realize I've done enough. It doesn't mean I won't ever do the stuff I've done ever again. I'm still this person. But it does mean that I will only do so if I truly can. And I will fight harder to not bite off more than I can chew. And it'll be an adjustment process. But one thing that makes it easier is that by filling up my life with more things that I do enjoy, it will be much harder to commit to things that do not bring me joy. My calendar will be filled up, so to speak. Not literally. Sometimes yes, but just the way I'm spending my time is already occupied with these good things. So in order to do something that I don't want to do, or maybe that is off brand for me, which in the past wouldn't have been off brand. So now I'm changing, I guess, my brand. Anyway, to do so would require me to sacrifice happiness. It would require me to sacrifice the happiness that I am building. And it's okay to do that from time to time. It's okay to, give up some of your time and give that to somebody else. It's a good thing as the kind of person I want to remain being. But before, I was just filling up my time with anything. Now the goal is for my time to be filled with those good things. And this helps me to reinforce the permanence of those healthy things. And then for the temporary moments, for the things that could lead to burnout, that's no longer my new normal. My new normal is the good things. And those temporary moments are exactly that, temporary. Give that time in spurts. And that makes much more sense. It's much healthier. We didn't use this phrasing in therapy this time, but it essentially goes back to something that my therapist reminded me of. And that is that I may have a hard time feeling good feelings with depression, but I will never experience any joy at all if I do not do things that I do enjoy. So I have to put myself into situations that bring me joy if I ever want a shot at feeling it, and I have not been doing that. I've instead been putting myself into situations that burn me all the way out. So from now on, that's the priority. Do things that bring me joy. Put myself in situations that bring me joy. For me, at least starting out, that looks like going back to whiskey and a good book on some evenings, training with my dogs again more consistently, sticking to music, spending more time with friends and my partner, and going to work. That's it. That's all I'm committed to. Seems a lot less like a ramble, right? That's how it should be. Change is inevitable. I didn't permanently protect myself from ever burning out again with all this, but what I did do is create a sense of control and stability that will bring far more joy into my life. The lesson here is obvious, but for those that give themselves away too much or are asked too much of, we know that it can be hard to say no, even if you know what this lesson that I'm going to say is. Even if you're just fully aware of it, it can still be hard to say no. But the lesson is simply to realize that this is your life and you can do whatever the fuck you want to in it. This requires being comfortable, though, with letting people down or people not liking you or even missing cool opportunities. I promise It's not worth it to appease people or participate in even the coolest things if you can't enjoy it too. At some point, it's just important to realize that you have done enough. You're burnt out, and burn wounds take a long time to heal, even mental ones. It's important to start the healing right away. The cost of what you'll miss out on is a far cheaper price to pay than suffering until you break or die. Again, remember, that's how serious this can be. It's worth it. It might be scary to take action on this stuff, but it is worth it. So, to all my burned out peeps, come step in the shade with me. Say no again. And go do your favorite thing in the world right now. Give yourself back that time. Being happy and doing nothing is infinitely better for you than being miserable while doing something cool. And remember, that's just the worst case. Don't forget the better case is you're also letting go of all the crap that you hated doing. Our brains like to focus sometimes on missing out on the cool shit, but that's not all there is. And there will always be more cool shit. And next time, you'll have the strength and energy to do it, and you'll actually enjoy it. So I'm done burning out. It's time to cool off. And I hope that if you're experiencing burnout too, that you start this process right away. Like I said, it's not easy. You may not get all the support that I was privileged to receive, but no matter what, it's worth it. All right, well, take it easy. Remember to check out echosbox.com for all our social media and a copy of Fundamental Magic, and sweltersounds.com as well for that dope, sweet merch. We'll talk some more at you next time.